Hello and welcome. I thought it might be useful to go through these notes in a Edpuzzle format so that you can stop and start as needed. So the textbook itself is broken up into structures first and then functions later, and I don't like it that much, but it gets muddy going back and forth, and so we're going to keep it that way. So that's why I have the textbook numbers on there, so you can follow that. We're going to start with talking about the intestine, and the small intestine is where the majority of the digestion occurs. So we talked about that the mouth starts out with carbohydrate digestion, and then there's some protein digestion in the stomach, and there's mechanical digestion happening throughout, but the chemical is just salivary amylase in the mouth digesting carbohydrates, and then we have protein digestion with pepsin in the stomach. So when we get into the small intestine, then it's game on that everything is going to start to be absorbed or digested chemically. The small intestine is the site of nutrient absorption, and there's a lot of features that cause that to be effective, so we're going to look at that. The intestine itself is muscular, and it goes from the pyloric sphincter, which is at the end of the stomach. Remember where the pyloric sphincter opens and lets just like a teaspoon of chyme into the small intestine at a time. And then it ends at the ileo. The last portion of the small intestine is called the ileum, and the first portion of the large intestine is called the cecum. So there's a sphincter there between them, between the ileum and the cecum, and it's called the ileocecal valve. So the small intestine is suspended from the posterior abdominal wall by the mesentery. So remember, the mesentery is part of that peritoneal, that fatty lining with connective tissue that holds everything in place. So we have three different subdivisions of the small intestine. The first, yesterday they talked about it in the video, it can be called the duodenum or the duodenum. I've heard it both, so apparently I'm not sure which is which or which is right. It's directly attached to the stomach, and that is where the enzymes coming from the pancreas and the liver are going to dump in, and so we'll talk about that later. And then the jejunum is attached to the next portion, so that's right here. And the word jejunum means emptying. And then the ileum is the last portion that twists and turns. Ileum means twisted intestine, and it joins the cecum right there. So the main producers of the enzymes that are going to be affecting the small intestine digestion is the pancreas and the liver. So this is the pancreas right here, and this is the first part of the small intestine called the duodenum or the duodenum. You can see that hole right there. It is bringing in enzymes from the liver through this duct and through the pancreatic duct. So bile is formed by the liver, and then it enters going through this bile duct right here. So here is the textbook picture of all of the features, and I'll talk about them one at a time, but it's there. So once we get into the structure of the small intestine itself, which is all modified in order to increase surface area. So remember that surface area is really important, because the only way that the nutrients from the food are going to enter the bloodstream is if they touch the walls. So the whole setup is just designed to get the food to touch the walls. So the lining of the intestine itself, the small intestine, has these circular folds, and they are deep. You can see that they They have lots and lots of folds to them. And so food's going to get squished into there. And then directly connected to it, we have blood vessels that are going to pick up the nutrients and pick up the waste. Deliver the nutrients, pick up the nutrients and get rid of the waste. So within those circular folds, you can see right here that we have like an enlarged region right here. So that's what this is showing. This is the villi. So villi are like fingers. And so if you think about squishing Play-Doh through your fingers, that would be an appropriate way to think about it. They are really the workhorse because you can see here that we have vessels coming in, and these are called lacteals. And the lacteal has a lymph vessel in there, a blood vessel in there, or an artery, capillary bed, and a vein. So the artery is coming in with the oxygenated blood, and the vein is leaving with the deoxygenated blood. So that's kind of the workhorse. But within that, I don't know if you can see it here, but on the end of every one of those fingers is another finger. And the fingers on there would be more like hairs, but they still have tiny, tiny projections. So we're going to get food stuff stuck in all of these hairs. So those are called microvilli, and they are completely cells that absorb things. So they call them brush border because it looks like a thin hairbrush. But all of those things are designed to work together to increase surface area. When we get to the large intestine, that we're not digesting at that point. We're excreting. We're getting rid of the waste. So all of the nutrients have already been taken out of the foodstuffs. The large intestine is called large because of the diameter, not because of the length. It extends from the ileocecal valve, which is right here, and then it goes up these subdivisions and out. So we'll go through each of those. The first one is the cecum. So the cecum is right here, and the cecum has the appendix hanging off of it. And the appendix was once thought to be just a vestigial structure, a structure left over from our ancestral heritage through evolution that is no longer used. But we're finding that there's a lot of lymphatic tissue in there that really houses some good bacteria, but it can become inflamed, and that results in appendicitis. And if appendicitis bursts, then we can end up having a hard time. So there is the appendix right here. Here's the whole thing. So again, looking at it more closely. So going through each part of the colon itself. So we just entered the cecum. Now we're going to go up the ascending colon, and then across the transverse colon, and then down the descending colon, and into the S-shaped sigmoid colon. And then we end up going into the rectum and then into the anus. I shouldn't say we, but the anus is the opening of the large intestine. It has an external and an internal sphincter. So your internal one is involuntary. And so when you feel you got to go, it's letting you know. The external one is under skeletal muscle and voluntary control. So when you are being potty trained, you are learning control over that external anal sphincter. So these sphincters are normally closed except when it's time to go. And there's a picture of the whole thing again. So some facts about the large intestine: it has no villi because its goal is not to absorb any food. All the nutrients have been removed from the food at this point. It has goblet cells. Goblet cells produce mucus. Mucus is alkaline, so any leftover acidity from the process is going to be neutralized. And it also is going to lubricate so it's not so hard to poop. We're also going to go through the accessory digestive organs tomorrow. So then I will start to go through and talk about the whole process and all of the chemicals that are going to do the actual work. So that's it for this portion.